So again, my name is Ben Lewis, and I'm a member. I am with the San Dimas Chamber, and some of our chamber members are here today. So if you have time after the presentation, I ask that you meet with our chamber and again speak with us regarding commerce and things that are happening within the city. With that, I'd like to go ahead and start with the introduction of the dignitaries. So first, we'll start with Mayor Curt Morris, Mayor Pro Tem Ryan Vienna, Councilmember Emmett Bader, Councilmember John Ebner, Councilmember Dennis Bertone, City Manager Ken Duran, the Assistant City Manager Brad McKinney. We have with us Mark Lundgren from Senator Anthony Portantino's office. We have Matt Lyons from Assemblymember Chris Holden's office. We have Vicki Paul from Supervisor Catherine Barger's office. We have Aldo Marcias Alejano, I apologize for that, with the County Assessor's office. And then we have members from the Bonita Unified School Board. So if you could, again, welcome Kevin Lee, the Assistant Superintendent. Matt Wine, the Assistant Superintendent. Susan Hume, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Matt Lyons again, he's the Vice President of the board. Diana Coach, board member. And then we have a number of the principals from the various schools within the school district. We have Scott Sparks with the San Dimas High School. Scott is also a member of the San Dimas Board of Directors. We have Debbie Grenier with the Allen Avenue Elementary School. We have, is it Jazz Koss with the Long Hill Principal? It was Jason? I apologize. Ji Wang with the Estrada Principal? I can't read my writing. I apologize. Christina Black with Chaparral High School. And then we have Captain Andy Berg with the San Dimas Sheriff's Department. Did I miss anyone in terms of dignitaries that may have slipped in while I was there? While I was up there on stage? So again, if I did, I apologize, and we'll give you plenty of time after if I did do that. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Ken Duran for the balance of the actual city address. So Ken.
Thank you, Ben. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Morris for the State of the City address. Let me give you a little bit of background regarding Mayor Morris. He's a native San Dimian and has lived here most of his life. He was first elected to the City Council in 1980, and he was appointed mayor in 1986 by his council colleagues and was subsequently elected mayor in 1997. As a directly elected mayor, he's been up for re-election every 2 years and has been re-elected every election since then. In his elected capacity, he also represents the city on various regional boards, including the Los Angeles County Sanitation District, the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority, and the Sheriff's Department Liability Trust Fund, among many others. He is also a long-term board member of the Pomona Valley Hospital and Inter Valley Health Plan. In his private vocation, he is an attorney with a private practice here in San Dimas. He is a graduate of Stanford University and Loyola University Law School, and proudly served as a United States Navy officer. He and his wife, Glenda, have 3 adult children. With 40 years of serving the city of San Dimas and 24 years as mayor, he's been an integral part of many of the progressive changes in the city, while maintaining the city's heritage and charm that he knows from growing up here. Before we call on him for his address, we'd like to pay tribute to Mayor Morris and his accomplishments over the past 40 years with a brief video retrospective.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming. We have to hurry the ceremony because the sun line is moving.
Welcome to Ask the Mayor. I'm Curt Morris, the mayor of San Dimas.
Hello, my friend, it's been a while. All our old clothes are back in style. We went our separate ways, only to return to face a lesson we failed to learn. We didn't understand the truth. We were blinded by the eyes of you. Time kept on moving.
This is really a great day to open the new old hardware store officially and to recognize all the people who have really done a lot to make it all happen.
I have been a resident of San Dimas since I was a small boy, and that was a long time ago. I attended local schools. I went to Stanford. After I graduated from Stanford, I served a hitch in the Navy as an officer. When I finished all of that, I came back to Southern California and to San Dimas. I graduated from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, and I started practicing law for a period of time.
You gave your love and your innocence,
and they took away your confidence. I'm not those women, and I'm not those men, but your arms around me, I am your friend.
'cause I feel just like you, and I cry just like you, but I heal just like you, and under my skin I'm just like you and everybody else. When I get hurt, I cry for help, and I've got secrets that God only knows.
Welcome to the City Council meeting. We have some recognitions that we're going to do tonight. The first one is the Association for the Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs. They instead of us presenting a plaque, they're going to present a plaque to the city
Just like you, but I'm weak, just like you, and under my skin.
That, I think we're probably just about out of time. And so, Ken, do you have any last comments?
No, again, we're down probably to your last few shows between now and when your term expires. So,
Yes.
But we will plan on being here in 2 weeks, I think.
And I hope that some of you will at least call.
Yes.
Because this program is really for you.
And under my skin, I'm just like you.
I would like to acknowledge the staff of KWST and City Clerk Deborah Black and Nicolette Drulius and Glenda Morris for providing us the information and putting that video together. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Curt Morris.
Well, thank you all for being here. I was thinking about actually writing a speech for this event since this is the last one, but having watched a few candidates reading their speeches, I decided I'm not doing that. If you have to write a speech, if you don't have a teleprompter, you're in big trouble, because you have to. The big time politicians have it easy. They can look out at you and read it right off the screen, but we don't have that here. So I don't know how we get to where we are, but I can tell you a little bit about how I got to this place. I was practicing law in Pomona with the best firm in Pomona, an old line, prestigious law firm, and I was a member of the board of directors of Pomona Valley Community Hospital. And I actually became a member of the board of directors because that firm always had a member of the board of directors. So it was kind of like, I don't know if I was chosen on merit or if I was chosen because it was my turn. But I sort of never went away. I will be reelected to that board in April, and I know that because I'm on the nominating committee. And then I can serve 2 3-year terms before I have to go off for a 1-year thing. And I think 2 3-year terms probably going to finish all I'm ever going to want to do with this stuff. So, but that's been a labor of love. And I get to that because of this. I was at a dinner of the hospital board, and I was sitting next to Tom Nuss. And Tom Nuss was a judge. Tom has been the mayor of San Dimas at one time, and so he said, is there any way you could be convinced to run for the city council in San Dimas? And I told Tom I didn't know anything about running for city council. I had lived in San Dimas, but I hadn't been involved in anything. And he said, well, you know, there are people in the community who feel embarrassed by the conduct of our city council. And there's a split, and they are not civil to each other. It's a battle, and we would like to restore civility to the city council. So I said, well, I'd consider it. So I met with some people, and the only one who's still living is Tom. But one of them was the first mayor of San Dimas, and I knew of him, but I really didn't know him, and that's the way all of these people were, because although I grew up in San Dimas, my family was not a part of sort of the ruling group. But and I remember what Stanley Plummer told me. He said, you know, if you are good enough, fortunate enough to be elected, and that's always a doubt, he said, you will have a lot of friends. Everybody will be your friend. And then you will make a decision or participate in a decision, and you will lose some of those friends. And he said, so by the time your term is up, you'll be lucky to get out of town alive. So I just would say, if wherever Stan is now, I'm making it out of town alive, at least so far. But there was a heated discussion in San Dimas about the future of the city. The planning was that San Dimas would reach a built-out maximum, and it would be here by this time, and the population would be somewhere in the 50 to 60 to 70,000 people. And there were people in the community who said, we really don't want to be that size. And one of the big areas was, of course, then was Villa Verde, which only part of it had been developed. And Villa Verde was a planned community. It was going to have single-family housing and some very expensive single-family housing, and then it was going to have some condominiums and some denser things, and it had a shopping center. Well, during all of these things that were going on, there was an approval of the condominiums, and the people who lived in the community didn't want those condominiums, and so there was a referendum. And the referendum, and it had a lot of voters in those days. The referendum won by like 460 votes to 370 or something like that. I mean, there were not a lot of people. Changed the total thrust of where San Dimas was going. After that, we created a hillside development committee, and the owners of the property and some people, Dr. Ursher, Phil Wax, they all worked together, the city worked together, and we ended up coming to a reasonable conclusion. And literally, I used to describe the role of the two city councilmen who were on that committee and the one planning commissioner. We were like the graphite rods in a nuclear reactor. We kept it from blowing up, but that's about what we did. But that ended those political wars after a while. But it also, that vote doomed the Villa Verde Shopping Center, because the Villa Verde Shopping Center had been designed to have a population around it, and that population did not exist because of the changing in the zoning. So everything has consequences. When you make a change in one place, nobody thinks about all the consequences, but that was a consequence. Before I go further in this, I'd like to just acknowledge Glenda. Thank you for a whole life. And sitting behind Glenda is a woman that I went to school with from first grade. However, if she tells you I got some things wrong, take into consideration she might be a little over the edge. Although she is younger than me. But anyway, my first, we're talking about now, we have a recreation center, a swim and racket club it was called then. We're dealing with, it's sort of nearing the end of its life in some ways, and needs to be repurposed, or various things might happen. That swim and racket club was a very big issue in the 1980 council election, a very big issue. And the insurgents, Ed Alex, who was the first elected mayor, he was on the council and he opposed that. So after the election, there are only 4 council members. It's Dr. Ursher, Terry Dipple, me, and Ed Alex. For some fluke, and I don't know how this happened, but the first reading of the approval of that Parks and Rec, that facility, which was expensive for those days. I mean, it was a lot of money. Had happened, but not the second reading. So Bob Poff called me and said, we may have actually had a meeting. And he said, I know this was a big controversy, and so I know that Ed Alex is going to vote no. He said, but I've never heard what your position is with regard to this project. And he said, so if you vote no, it's going to be a 2-2 vote, and it's going to fail. Well, I knew that at that point I had a chance to make some people angry and some people happy. Maybe not happy, but some people angry. That if I voted yes, that at least Ed Alex was not going to be happy at all. And there may be a few other, he had many supporters. So I didn't think about it. I can't say that I gave it a whole lot of thought. I said, Bob, you know, that was all done. It got this far before I got involved, and I am not going to block that from happening. So I'm going to vote yes. I think that was, looking back, I think that may have had some effect on the fact that our city council became more civil. The division ended a little bit. It took a while because I think Dr. Ursher was still skeptical. But I look back and I think that was the first step toward changing the city council approach and ending a divisive time in the history here. There's another person I would like to also acknowledge, because this comes down to 1996, and our mayor found it necessary to resign. So there was a vacancy. One of the members of the city council desperately wanted to be the mayor, Sandy McHenry, and so he was agitating. He was the mayor pro tem. So Sandy was agitating that we should not appoint anyone. He should be able to be the mayor pro tem, and then we'd have a special election and he would be elected. And, you know, I didn't know how that was going to go. I had already decided pretty much that I was going to be finishing my 4th term as a city council member, and I was not going to run for re-election. So Dennis Bertone called me. And Dennis said, I will support you to be appointed as the mayor. And he said, and John will also support you. So Dennis and John are responsible for me being here or starting a long time ago. Beyond that, after an election, then it was whoever voted for me would be responsible. But I'd have to acknowledge to Dennis and to John that they selected me. And then Sandy also said, I mean, he could recognize inevitability, and he said, okay. So we started off, we then, there was ultimately an election, and Jeff Templeman prevailed in that election, and we had the same city council for a long time. Some people say that's bad, but I think it worked very well for San Dimas. We didn't always agree on everything. In fact, we disagreed on quite a few things, but we disagreed when we did in an agreeable way. I don't believe that anybody, I know I personally never had any feeling that any of the members of the city council voted the way they did on anything other than their conviction that that was the right thing for San Dimas. So it's been a pleasure to serve with all of the people that I have served with, and I think it has worked very well for the community for that. Now, we have had challenges, and the challenges that we have are more imposed by outside forces than we really have any control over. One of those, if you have been to these before, in the last 3 or 4 years, we were talking about the stormwater discharge permit and the fact that the regulations that were going to be imposed on us to clean up the water from the hills that come across and flow through San Dimas, and surprisingly enough, there's bacteria from various activities in those hills. It was going to be more money than we could afford. The water quality boards in California were doing this very stringent requirements for cleaning up the water. And the estimates were, it would cost more than our total budget. And they were saying that they were merely enforcing federal law And therefore, since they were merely enforcing federal law, these were not unfunded mandates. Because under California law, if the state imposes a requirement on a city, they have to provide the funding to make that requirement happen. But there were two court cases that were decided. One of them was in the Supreme Court of the United States. The argument was by the EPA that their mandate was to clean up the water, and that the cost of doing it was not a consideration, that they even considered. The United States Supreme Court said, wrong. You do have to consider the financial feasibility of doing these things. Then there was a California case that decided that to the extent that the Water Quality Board was enforcing standards that were more stringent than the federal standards, it was an unfunded mandate. And so all of this now, enforcement is, people are looking around trying to find out what's going on. Under the current administration, the EPA has reduced a lot of their restrictions, and the California, it hasn't been decided how much of the California regulations would be unfunded mandates or not. So we were talking about doom and gloom, and it was doom and gloom then about those issues, but not now, because that one has moved on. So now we're talking about doom and gloom with housing. We all have, the state is mandating that we permit changes that will totally change the character of the community. One of those laws is already in effect. And I could tell you, if you go back to when I became a member of the city council, the entire downtown, the town core section of housing was a duplex zone. Not too many duplexes had been built, but it was a duplex zone. It was not single family zoning. And I, having grown up here and been familiar with that part of town, thought that was, we needed to keep that for single family the way it was, do what we could to do that. But it was not until John was elected to the city council that I got the third vote to do away with the duplex zones. However, January 1, the state mandated that every zone, there are no single family zones that are not where you can prohibit auxiliary dwelling units. Auxiliary dwelling units are, well, literally somebody can build a house in their backyard. So that may change, but I can tell you that change, if you drive through the old part of San Dimas and you look at the investment that people have made there and the upgrades and what they've done with that housing, John, that worked when we eliminated the duplex zone there. So the city council in the future is going to face challenges of housing and trying to keep this community the way it is and the way it has been that are really unprecedented. The state is taking over more and more control of what we can do locally. And hopefully that will go away. There will sometime come a time when they say that's going too far. But however, we have to zone for that. And in fact, if we zone for it and it's not built, it will be assumed that it was barriers that cities imposed, and we will lose our gas tax. That is the threat. However, there are people now who are beginning to say, cities may have been a little bit of a problem, but they are not the problem. It's money. There is no money to build affordable housing because affordable housing in California must be subsidized. There is no way to build it without it being subsidized. And then, because the legislature is beholden to different masters, they also put in the requirement in all of these new housing bills that housing built under those restrictions and the way that they want it to be done will be at prevailing wage. All of our government contracts, all construction has to be at prevailing wage. And so what's prevailing wage mean? That means about 30% more than it would cost otherwise. There is nobody in the state, or so far as I know, in the world, saying you can build housing at prevailing wages. It just cannot be done because it's just way too expensive. And one of the problems now, when they look at the cost of construction, let's say you get the dirt free, the cost of construction makes the houses not affordable. So we'll have to zone for it, they will have to zone for it, but I don't, who knows if any houses are going to be built, because people are saying it's not going to work. And they point out they can't get the money from cities because cities don't have the money. So whatever happens, there will be a lot of going back and forth. Senate Bill 50 was defeated, and that's really a draconian thing of having to have very dense, high-rise rental units, primarily rental units, without parking. It's like the goal line now. They've decided that they don't need parking at the station. Metro has decided that. Well, if you're going to have anybody ride the goal line, I think what they're recognizing is there aren't going to be very many people riding the goal line. But nevertheless, all of these things that are mandated that the city has to respond to, whether they happen or whether the community here wants it to happen, the state has decided that they will take over. California is really a one-party state now, and sort of historically, one-party states do dumb things. But nevertheless, what we want our city council people to have challenges, and they have challenges. There are a lot of other things that the city does on a kind of a constant basis. We have for many years, we have worked on trying to build a tax base that would support our government operations. Our tax base issue is complicated by the fact that we don't get all of the property tax that would normally be allocated to a city. When Prop 13 was passed, and it limited the tax to the 1% of the value of the property, they said, well, there are cities, and there were mostly newer cities like San Dimas, that are not charging the maximum tax rate that they could charge. And therefore, they don't need the money. So that extra, their residents are still going to pay the same tax everybody else pays, but they're not going to get the money. So while we have substantially more assessed valuation than either Claremont or Laverne, we get substantially less in property tax. So when we start looking, that makes us very dependent on other kinds of taxes. One of them is sales tax. Sales tax, we are fortunate enough that our sales tax is paid approximately 80% by residents of San Dimas, and approximately 20% is paid by non-residents who buy things in San Dimas. And for a city that does not have auto dealers, that is pretty exceptional. That's why if you notice the Laverne measure that is like the measure SD in San Dimas to increase the sales tax by 0.75%, it is proposed that it will generate $3.1 million in Laverne. That same increase in sales tax in San Dimas is projected to produce $4.6 to $4.7 million. But the reality is there is Amazon out there and a million other people like that. Amazon now does pay something for sales tax, but many internet sales are not taxed at all. So the net result of that, and maybe restaurants becoming more expensive, so restaurants are under pressure, our sales tax is almost flat. So you go forward with the revenue, our biggest revenue is flat. Our costs are going up somewhat more than the cost of living. So the gap gets wider as you go down the line. That's why the City Council was willing to put Measure SD on the ballot to give the voters a chance, because this is also something that will make a major difference in the future of San Dimas and where the city goes, because if you don't have the revenue to support the things that we do, the way the city looks, the maintenance of everything that we have, and the programs that are run, which I think are run efficiently, personally, they're run efficiently, and we use the money carefully. But we can't deal with a doubling of the cost of asphalt. We can't deal with the various things that costs are increasing tremendously without a revenue stream that matches that. Now, Amazon, we do get some sales tax from that, but that sales tax is divided in a different way. Our regular sales tax is a point of sale tax. And so where it's sold, that's where the tax applies. And that's San Dimas is doing, we're doing well. The Amazon and all of the other kinds of things go into a pool that's divided on a pro rata basis. So it's based on population. We lose on that. We're essentially losing 20% of what we would otherwise get. The very most efficient tax the city can have that will produce the most revenue for a square foot of property is a hotel tax. We have a transient occupancy tax, we get all of it. The voters in San Dimas increased that. We were at 8%, they increased it to 12%. A lot of people are a lot higher than that now. But, so that would mean that if there was a proposed hotel and the staff did a great job and a lot of work, we had independent analysis of hotels, whether this was a feasible place for a hotel. They found it to be, this independent group found it to be feasible, but they never found it to be feasible for a hotel that charges $250 a night. That's what the hotel in the Pioneer, whatever the square, would be scaled at. Marriott has their own studies. Marriott says this would support a class of Marriott hotel that's in the $125 to $150 a night category. That would have produced for the city of San Dimas, in our most conservative estimates, would have produced $500,000 a year in transient occupancy tax. To get the same amount of tax from sales tax, you have to be 12 times that in the total, because we get all of the money for that. There was some opposition to that. The city council decided, well, they'd try for something else. So let me tell you what this was the only thing offered, because nobody made only one group even offered to buy that property to develop it at all. And what they propose is more than half of the property will be developed as very high density residential. When I say very high density, it'll be well over twice the density of any project ever approved in San Dimas. It will be built on a podium, as it's called, they'll build a parking structure that covers the whole land. They'll build everything above that. So people objected to a, quote, big hotel. The big hotel is dwarfed by these proposed condominiums. I mean, they're taller, they occupy a whole lot more land, all of those things. And those condominiums, we lose money on because they don't produce enough money. The property tax does not produce enough money to provide basic services in San Dimas. So, and then you say, well, okay, it'll be some low-income housing, maybe. Yeah, at $700,000 a unit, I don't think it's low-income housing. They also, their plan requires them to get any revenue to the city. It requires this $250 a night boutique hotel be approved. Well, the guy who wants to build this, obviously, will have to go to lenders to borrow the money to do it. When he goes to lenders to borrow the money, they will look at all the surveys that have been done, and they'll look at their own, and they'll say, we don't think we're going to finance this. So unless you can finance it pretty close to 100% yourself, that's not likely to be financed. And all of this is being done to produce a commercial area less than half the size of the Albertson store. So they have the city is working on giving them an exclusive negotiating agreement, but even as our consultant says, the issue is whether it can ever be financed. So that's an issue that property, I still think maybe someday, although there may not be an opportunity to build a hotel in the future. By the way, our consultant says the $500,000 estimate for hotel tax is low. It really ought to be closer to $700,000 to $750,000. So whether or not the sales tax is approved, that is a big hole in a budget that could have been filled by a hotel. And the staff did a lot of work. They got that to the point where it was there, and we decided not to do it. But I think you always have to consider, in all of these things, somewhere in it has to be financeable. We can say we would like to have something, but we can't make that happen. Cities are able to prohibit projects although with housing it's going to be a little difficult, can prohibit projects, but they can't make them happen because they can't make anybody spend money to do those projects, and they won't spend money unless they think there's a reasonable rate, a chance that they'll be able to pay the debt. So there are a lot of issues that are just going to be continuing to face us. And of course, the other issue, and this one is, there's nothing we can do about this one. But the goal line will go through San Dimas, from starting at Euclid to San Dimas Avenue. It'll be elevated. And it'll be elevated where, at going over the track, going over the intersection of Cataract and Bonita, the track will be 30 feet off the ground. Above that will be the train, and above that will be the electrical system that powers the train. Give you some perspective, the Berlin Wall was only about half that high. The Berlin Wall got a lot of graffiti. I suspect that our opportunity for graffiti is going to increase tremendously with that wall. We can't do anything about that. We're going to have that. It's going to just cut San Dimas in half. So there are a lot of challenges to try to maintain the community that we have and people say they really like. So when you hear that things are happening that you don't like, don't necessarily blame the city council, because these are out of their hands. They're not things that they can easily change. So I I have done this long enough. It's been a great privilege to serve as a council member and as the mayor of San Dimas. I think I'm getting out of town without being run out of town by anybody, but who knows? But I can just tell you that for all the people that I have worked with, including the city council people, including the city government and the city employees, I can tell you from the state of the city standpoint, we've had a lot of turnover of employees, but it's been for good reasons. Our employees have fulfilled careers here and have retired, and they have been replaced with people who will carry the burden of the city in managing and making the city work into the future. And I am very confident that they will do that very well. And I think the employees, I know a lot of people just say government employees, but the bottom line is I'm confident they will do the job very well, and we certainly hope so, since I'm going to be living here at least for the remainder of my life, which my wife has pointed out to me. Glenda is very good at just getting things down to the nub of things. She said, "We are not getting old. We are old." and that when we are old, we ought to be doing things together, because if we don't do them now, there probably is not going to be that many opportunities for the future. So there is another issue that I would just like to tell you, and this has to do with the city staff. And many people talk about that our planning department in particular, and building to a lesser degree, are difficult to deal with. Now I ask you, if you've ever dealt with developers who are nice and honorable people, but they're in it to make money, and they're going to build whatever they can get away with building, and they are going to move on. And the citizens are left here to live with whatever is built. It is not bad to have high standards. In fact, I submit having high standards is good, and it's one of the reasons that this city is such a favorable place to live by a lot of people. And I ask you, would you want your planning department to have a reputation among developers as the easiest one in the region? I don't think so. I think that there's somebody has to hold the standards, and unfortunately, it's easy for people in Parks and Recreation to be very popular because they don't have to say no to anybody. The people in building, builders will complain. People who do home remodeling and things like that, they will complain about the building departments. Oh, they're horrible to deal with. And they're horrible to deal with because they're enforcing the building code. And if a person wants to take a shortcut, so who are those building inspectors working for? They're working for the residents of the city. They're to protect, to make sure that things are done in a proper way. I remember seeing some photographs. We had a building being built in San Dimas, and the owners were very upset because it was being delayed, and was being delayed by the building department, and why they were just unreasonable. So Eric showed me some pictures. And this was a situation where when you do the slab, you put a plate of wood down over it, and it's bolted in. A bolt comes up through, and so that's bolted. The structure that will be built above that, the studs and the rafters and all the things above will be secured to the foundation. So The people who did this made a slight miscalculation, so that in maybe every third stud came down to this point right where the bolt was. Their solution for that was they cut the stud off. So effectively, they ended up with half of the studs holding up the wall of the required wall, and they thought it was very unreasonable, the contractor did, that the building department would not sign off on that. Well, it would have been shame on us if they had. So when you hear that people are having difficulties with the building or planning, be careful that maybe the person complaining is complaining because they're trying to cut the corners and somebody is not permitting them to cut the corners. But there will always be complainers. But I know people, architects and other people who say San Dimas is a delightful place to work if you know and follow the rules and your work product is good. There's no difficulty. So that's an area that I think is important for us to all consider. The other thing I'd like to mention is that our relationship with the Sheriff's Department is outstanding. The Sheriff's Department provides to San Dimas the benefits of a local police department and at a whole lot less expense than it would cost if we had our own police department. A whole lot less. So Captain Berg is just a great example of a person who he's our police chief. He's at the sheriff's station, and he's doing great things. There's one other thing and I'm finished, but all of this takes a long time. I remember when I first became a member of the city council, Bob Poff was trying to put together on Walnut and Bonita Avenue a parcel of property that would have the post office, the fire department, the sheriff's department, and actually the county road department. There's a place there. And so it took a long time. And Supervisor Shabaram helped on that. David Dreyer helped because there were a lot of government agencies. A lot of the land that we ended up trying to get acquired for that came from the Department of Agriculture, from the Forestry Department. So it used to amaze me. We would have public hearing notices on our agendas that we were buying property in the Los Padres National Forest. And I used to think, why wouldn't somebody ask a question? Why are we buying property in the Los Padres National Forest or next to it? Well, we were buying it to trade because they wouldn't sell us land to put this all together. It had to be a trade. So nothing that a city does is ever finished. And all of the people who are in positions of leadership in the community, in all kinds of ways, we're all a part of trying to move the ball down the line, not even knowing where the goal line is sometimes. But it's not going to be done overnight, and there'll be a lot to it. But I have really appreciated the opportunity to be part of it, to be, I think, in a time where things went very well for San Dimas. And so I thank all of you for spending your time to come here this morning. It's not easy for people to say, well, I'll go waste part of my time. So thank you all very much, and I wish all of you very well, and I certainly wish the members of the City Council and the next City Council the very best of luck, because I know that they will all be doing their best, and in some cases it'll be very challenging. Thank you.